So for a while, we've been discussing whether or not Once Upon a Time will get renewed for a Season 7. And trust me, I want a Season 7. The Once Upon a Time videos are the bread and butter of this channel, but I want to talk rationally. And so what we're going to do here is look at the view count of the premiere episodes of Once Upon a Time and several other shows. We're going to compare Once ratings or viewership to shows on ABC, shows on the CW, one show on CBS, one show on NBC, and then also one show on a privately owned network, which would be The Walking Dead or AMC, and we're going to be looking at the ratings of The Walking Dead. Now, obviously, viewership is a very big component, but there are other components that lead to cancellation and whatnot. Ratings are a big thing, but I think ratings for shows are best done when the show is essentially allowed, half of its season to air, because then you can kind of give or take. I think when you're only 4 episodes in, it's not really enough. So what we're going to look at here is the premiere episode of every season of Once and, etc., for the other shows, all looking at the premiere, maybe talking about the finale, but I really think that the premiere episode is where our analysis can lie in terms of whether or not the show will get its 7th season. So let's look at the Once Upon a Time ratings or viewer count, for season 1 through 6. All right, so with season 1, it started off with 12.93 million, almost 13 million views on that one episode. That's ridiculous. But then as you go down from season 2 to 3, 4 bounced up, but it dropped just about 1 million for season 2, which is fine. Like, that's an okay drop. But then it dropped nearly 3 million for season 3, and then it went back up for season 4, but then it went drastically down for season 5. It went down 4 million for season 5, which is ridiculous in the amount of viewership that this premiere lost. I think that has to do to the fact that Frozen was no longer there and that Brave wasn't a big enough of a draw. Also, season 4 had some really weird marketing, so I don't think that, season 5 had some really weird marketing. Season 4 marketing was all in our face. So I don't think 5 had a very strong marketing campaign, and I think 6 had an even weaker marketing campaign, because for 6, we have 3.99 million views, and that's also essentially a 2 million drop from the season 5 premiere. So that's very, very significant. That's a lot of people that essentially dropped out. And if you look at the viewership for the season finales, now obviously we can't look at that for season 6, and by the time a show gets renewed, generally the finale has yet to air. But let's just look at the finales for Once. You have 9 million, 7 million, 6 million, 5 million, 4 million. It just keeps dropping, and that's not good. That means people are significantly losing interest. The finale to the premiere of season 1 was about 3 million. That's still 3 million of a difference, but it's still pretty high. It's almost 10 million. But then, the premiere of Once Upon a Time dropped 4 million in season 4. It had 9.47 million for the premiere, again, due to Frozen, and then it went down to 5.5 million, and that's very, very unfortunate. And the premiere episode of season 5 to the season 4 is essentially on average with popular shows on the CW. And in all honesty, the CW has very scary ratings with their viewership. It's interesting. Like, the season 5 for the CW, they would want. That's like success for them. And I think ratings like this is what would make the shows last for almost forever. But for ABC, it's very, very interesting that the show is still able to even be on for season 6, because that's a very big drop. So now let's essentially compare a show that's very similar to Once Upon a Time in terms of seasons and viewership and whatnot. So we're going to talk about Scandal. Now, Scandal, and we're also going to talk about How to Get Away with Murder, which are big parts of the Thank God It's Thursday lineup. And let's talk about Scandal. So we're going to open up our Scandal chart. So Scandal started off with 7.3 million for season 1. That's very good. It's a lot less than Once. Then it went down for season 2. Just like Once, it went down about 1 million, and then it went back up. It went extraordinarily up, which is probably why they renewed it for a season 4, because the premiere episode scored 10 million viewers. And also the finale of season 3 also scored 10 million viewers. It literally went up. This is an extraordinary thing in television. You never see a premiere be or have less views than a finale. That's normally never the case. So the finale of Scandal of season 3 is kind of like TV history right there. That's crazy. So then If you look at 4, it went up again. Now, it still hasn't beaten the Once for its pilot, but every other episode of Scandal, on average, has done better than Once Upon a Time. The season 5 premiere of Scandal had 10.25 million viewers. The season 5 premiere Once Upon a Time, 5.6. That's essentially 5 million less, and that's very, very scary. The finale of season 5 for Once Upon a Time had only 4 million viewers. The finale of Scandal season 5 had 6.5 million viewers. And the reason why I bring Scandal into this is A, I actually really like the show Scandal, and B, Scandal is very similar to Once Upon a Time. Again, 5 seasons. It was been renewed for season 6 as well. As though 6 for Scandal hadn't started yet due to Kerry Washington needing to take some time off due to her pregnancy. But 2 shows, a very, very active cast, a very vocal cast, very interactive. They always live tweet with their fan base, just like the Once Upon a Time cast does. And here, you can see, why ABC would keep Scandal, because the view that's not a word. The view count keeps increasing more or less, or it increased so much after season 2, and it stayed flat in the 10 millions for the low teens, I guess, for the premiere episodes for the last 3 seasons. So they can only hope that they get a solid season 6 premiere, and if they can keep their finale episodes between 6 to 7 million, they're really going to beat out Once Upon a Time. And I can truly see why ABC would keep Scandal on, because its ratings and its view count is just so much higher. So now let's look at another show that is on ABC, which is How to Get Away with Murder, again on the TGI T lineup. Now, the premiere episode of How to Get Away with Murder had 14.12 million viewers. That's more than Once Upon a Time. And the finale for How to Get Away with Murder season 1 had 8.99 million viewers. Now, that's a little bit less than the finale of Once Upon a Time, but the premiere episode of How to Get Away with Murder was significantly higher by almost 2 million viewers. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of revenue. The more people that watch, the more money ABC makes. Then if you look at season 2, their view count for season 2 went down by almost half. Went down by 6 million. And for Once Upon a Time, for their season 2, they only went down by 1 million. So that's very interesting. But if you look at the year, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder came out in 2015 for the season 2, and that was the year of season 5. And the premiere of season 2 for How to Get Away with Murder had 8.3, and the premiere of season 5 for Once only had 5.9. And the finale of How to Get Away with Murder did better than the finale of season 5. It's kind of best to go by years here, because now we really know who's watching and whatnot. If we just go by the pilot to the pilot, it's sort of unfair. Then if you look at the premiere episode of season 3, which is the most recent, and the premiere episode of season 6, again, How to Get Away with Murder has beaten Once Upon a Time by over 1 million, which is wild. So these 2 shows, Shonda Rhimes' shows, are doing much better than Adam and Eddie overall. And again, I can see why they would be able to get it renewed for a 4th season and get renewed for a 7th season. Now, they haven't been renewed yet. They haven't got their renewal, but you can see it happen. You really can see that happen. And this is, the first part of the case as to why Once might not get renewed, because there are other shows on the network that ABC might want to market better, because they're drawing in more people. And that's really what you want to see. So now let's look at another network, the CW. Now, the CW is really interesting, and they're not as popular as CBS. I'm going to look at CBS in a little bit, and NBC. But the CW has very, very popular shows. And we're not going to talk about Supernatural, which is essentially the most popular show on the CW, but the Supernatural shows all air in about the 2 millions for their recent premieres. But now we're going to talk about The Flash, Arrow, and Supergirl. Now, Supergirl's going to be the last, because Supergirl's going to be a transition into comparing Once Upon a Time ratings into the CBS ratings. So let's look at Arrow. So the premiere episode of Arrow season 4, which had 4.1 million, 4.14 million, which is really low, really low, especially for a DC property. Now, Arrow is the first show of the Arrowverse, but as you look at it, you wonder, what made DC or the CW keep going here? There's just something different with the way the CW looks at viewership to the way the bigger the bigger cable networks do. And so with Arrow, which came out in 2012, which is around the same time that season 2 of Once Upon a Time came out, Once trumps it. Like, you really could see if Arrow aired on ABC, Arrow would not have lasted. Arrow had 11 million views, or Once Upon a Time had 11 million. Arrow only had 4. Now let's just talk about the most recent seasons because I don't want to make this video too long, and this is interesting. So season 5 of Arrow has only had 1.8 million people watch, and the season premiere of Once had essentially 4 million people watch, which is very drastic. That's a very, very big distinction. And I think Arrow actually isn't that great of a show in comparison to Once Upon a Time. I really like the characters on Once so much more than the characters in Arrow. I actually like the characters on Supergirl a little bit more than the characters on Once Upon a Time, just because they're newer to me and a bit more fresh. But the characters in Arrow at this point are kind of done. Like, the story seems very much over. This new arc they have isn't doing that well, and I think that's being blatantly shown in the viewership that they have. Even the premiere, even the finale, all the finales of Arrow were able to get in over 2 million views. Once Upon a Time finales were able to blow that away. So again, if these shows aired on ABC, Arrow would not make it because its ratings are way too low. But again, the Arrow started this whole new universe, and that's essentially the reason that they're keeping it, because the CW just went off a ratings alone. I think Arrow is the most disliked show on the CW at the moment. So if Arrow just was off these viewerships alone, they would be cut. It would not last. But my point being is here, you can have shows with low view count and still keep them on. And the CW is a fantastic example of that. We're going to even look at Arrow again. We're going to look at Flash. So Flash, a show I love. I love The Flash. And The Flash had 4.8 million viewers for its season 1. That's the only season of Once Upon a Time that Flash loses to is season 6, the season that's on right now. And not one of the Flash's 2 finales that have aired have been able to beat Once Upon a Time's finales. So again, if Flash was on ABC, I really don't see Flash being able to survive. And even the premiere of Flash had less viewers than Once Upon a Time. So again, this is actually really good for us to realize that, shows can have low view count and still get a renewal. And I think it's very, very, very positive for us to know. And again, these shows are very, very well received too, like just by critics. And I think Once Upon a Time is very well received by critics 99% of the time. So I think we have something really good here to at least give us support that Once is still very likely to be getting a second season, especially if you compare it to Flash and Arrow, which I think have a bit more buzz because it's based on the DC comic shows, and DC Comics is just so wildly popular. So we're going to go from Flash into Supergirl. So Supergirl had 12.96 million views, but that's when it was on CBS, and we're going to talk about CBS in just a minute. But 12.96 million views, that blows away Once Upon a Time's first episode. That's wild. Granted by just 0.3 million, but still, that's a crazy amount of people. And that's amazing to me. That just blows my mind. Now, the finale of Supergirl only had 6.11, so it essentially lost 6 million viewers after it was making its way through its season, which is kind of sad. And only 2 seasons of Once Upon a Time can lose to that, which is, again, season 4 and season 5, which is actually kind of sad because I thought season 4, at least it had such a strong start, and the ratings prove that it had a very strong start, just like Supergirl, and people just fell off. Now, Supergirl for season 2 only had 3.6 million viewers. That is not as much as Once Upon a Time. And also, by the way, Supergirl came out in 2015, which is when season 5 of Once Upon a Time came out. Supergirl trumps season 5 if you go by year, but Once Upon a Time for season 6 and Supergirl for season 2, Once beats out Supergirl, which is very interesting here. But again, Supergirl has the prestige of being a DC property, and season 6 of Once Upon a Time hasn't really been marketed as a gigantic Disney story. It's had a lot of Aladdin, but I really think that when you are marketing major Disney properties, you're able to essentially get, that view count. I think season 4 proves that. But then when you don't market properly, like season 5, you had Brave, and Brave could have brought in a lot of viewers. They failed. So again, the ratings of Supergirl, or the viewers of Supergirl, are very, very different. It's 9 million between the first seasons, but it has to do with the network, because CBS is a stronger network than the WB or the CW. But again, the low start of Supergirl is fine. The low start of some shows is totally fine. But again, if you have to compare it back and forth to ABC versus CW, because ABC, granted, it's Disney and the CW is DC, but you have to remember, or I guess technically the CW is Warner Brothers / DC, but you have to remember they have different protocols for how they keep their shows, but you can also bear in mind that low ratings or low view count is okay, and that does mean at some point it doesn't really matter. It just has to do with just complete reception. So I think as we look at other shows, we'll get a little scared, but I think in the end we can go on a safe assessment that once probably will get it season 7, unless the next couple episodes just tank by the critics. All right, so Supergirl was on CBS, and now we're going to look at the most popular show on CBS. I believe it's the most popular show on CBS, and that would be Criminal Minds. Now, Criminal Minds used to be a show I really enjoyed, but CBS just has power, lots of pull when it comes to their television shows. The season premiere of Criminal Minds had 19.57 million. That's crazy. And that was in 2006. That's wild. And granted, over the past 12 seasons, they've gone down about 11 million for the season premiere of season 12 to have 8.9 million, but that still is significantly higher than the premiere episode of Once Upon a Time. And the season premiere of Criminal Minds came out just 3 days after the season premiere of Once Upon a Time for season 6 and season 12. But that's wild. Even if you just look at the premiere of season 6 of Criminal Minds, the season 6 premiere of Criminal Minds had 14 million. That's wild. There is definite pull. There's a definite draw to CBS that ABC doesn't have. And if Once Upon a Time was on CBS, I don't know if it would last. I really think it wouldn't. If this was the number CBS was seeing, CBS would cut that as quickly as they could. So if you count like this, that's impressive. I mean, this is 12 seasons, and you have to wonder, where did the Once Upon a Time fans go that gave us the 12.93 million, and now we're only down to 4? We've lost essentially 8 million viewers, and that's a lot. Like, we really need those viewers to come back to us. If we don't have those, the show could lose. If we just go on ratings alone, the show could lose, and I don't think we want that. So we may have to start a marketing campaign going, bring once viewers back, because it's just crazy. Even the finale of season 11 of Criminal Minds had 12 million viewers, and the season finale of Once Upon a Time season 5 only had 4.7 million. It's such a dip. Not one of the finales of Once Upon a Time can compare to the finales of Criminal Minds. Even the last finale, season 12, had 12.20 million viewers. Ridiculously wild. None of the Once Upon a Time videos even finales, come close to that. So this is more so on the side of, could the show get canceled? Well, if you look at other shows that do significantly better, and ABC can see that, they might want to pull in a show like Criminal Minds, but they already have other cop shows and whatnot. But there's definitely room for improvement if they want to go in that particular direction. Okay. So we're going to go off of CBS and we're going to go into NBC. NBC is, the Universal company, and we're going to look at a show that's also very similar to Once Upon a Time, which has been canceled. Now, it is going to get its season 6 run, but it is officially done, which is unfortunate because I really like that show. So we're going to talk about Grimm. So when we look at the premiere episode of Grimm, Grimm had a premiere of 6.5 million. That's half of Once Upon a Time. And Grimm and Once Upon a Time are both fairy tale shows, both shows with 6 seasons currently. Now, Grimm is starting at season 6 in January because NBC canceled it. And now let's just kind of compare back and forth. So Grimm had 6.5 million for season 1. Once had 12 million. Grimm had 5.6 million for season 2. Once had 11 million. So Once is totally overshadowing Grimm, though Grimm had horrible times that it was placed. It's aired on Fridays. No show on a Friday generally does well. So Grimm is a very solid exception to this. Then the season 3 premiere of Grimm had 6.15 million, and the season premiere of season 3 of Once Upon a Time had 8.52 million or 52 million. Season premiere of season 4 had 5.8. Season premiere of season 4 of Once had 9.47. That's also again due to the marketing of Frozen. Then when you go into the season 5 premiere, you had 4.4, and you have 5.93 for Once. And we still haven't seen the season 6 premiere of Grimm. But with season 5 and 5, they're essentially neck and neck. Because then if you look at the season finale of Grimm to the season finale of Once Upon a Time, you'll notice that Once is able to trump Grimm, and you can see why NBC would cancel Grimm. The season finale of Once for season 1 had 9.6 million, Grimm's finale had 5.10, Once Upon a Time for 2 had 7.3, Grimm only had 4.9, then we have 6.8 for season 3 of Once, and then we have 5.3 for the finale of Grimm. It's still a very significant dip, but what's interesting here is Grimm's numbers are consistently in the 5 to 4 millions. Well, Once Upon a Time just drops almost 2 million at a time, which is not good. So I think that's the problem, is ABC could see that they're losing viewership while Grimm's viewership is relatively steady. More or less. I mean, you can't really compare. I don't want to say it's apples to oranges, and you can compare it. But the Once viewership was just so high, and now it just is so low. There's something wrong there, and I think that's a problem. Now, Grimm has been canceled, as I said, and they will get their final season in January, but I think that ABC or NBC is just over the low numbers and they want to get a new show. They also canceled Constantine, which was not a smart choice in my opinion. I thought Constantine was a very good show. So we're going to look at one more show. Now, these have all been public networks we've been looking at. So we're going to look at the last network, which is a privately owned one. It's just to show you that, TV shows on even private networks can do significantly better than shows on publicly owned networks, and it's a bit of a bummer. So let's look at AMC's The Walking Dead. Now, The Walking Dead is ridiculous because its premiere started with only 5.35 million views. Wow. Now, granted, Walking Dead Season 1 only had 6 episodes, while Once Upon a Time had 22. But, Once really did beat it out. And then for Season 2 of Walking Dead, once again, beat it out. For Season 3 of Walking Dead, Once lost. Then for Season 4 of Walking Dead, Once lost again. The views just dipped for Once over and over and over. But the views for Grimm, the views for Walking Dead, they went drastically up, which a network, especially a privately owned network with a paid subscription, wants to see. They don't want to see, numbers drop, because if the numbers drops on a privately owned network, they're going to go, well, we need something that the audience likes. Clearly, the audience likes The Walking Dead, because we have 5 million for the premiere of 1, 7 million for the premiere of 2, 10 million for the premiere of 3, 16 million, a 16 million increase in views for Season 4. Then it went up again by 1 million, and it went down just a bit. Went down 3 million for the Season 6 premiere, and I cannot wait to see how many people tune in for the Season 7 premiere of The Walking Dead, because that will be crazy, because the finale of Season 6 was wild. And in all honesty, the finales of all The Walking Dead, except for Season 1, have all beaten out every finale that has so far aired for Once Upon a Time. It's just a different game. AMC just has the numbers, it has the money. I think it has a better marketing campaign. I think Season 6 and Season 7 were just so well marketed for the show, and I don't think ABC just did that for Season 5 and Season 6 of Once Upon a Time. And when you have views in the high to low teens, you want to keep that. You want to market that. But when you have views in the low millions, do you want to do that? Especially if it's not tied to a significantly huge property. Now, what's important with Once Upon a Time is, again, it's tied to Disney, so they can market Aladdin. And they've been relatively marketing, but it's not been a gigantic marketing flux. I think the biggest problem with Once Upon a Time's Aladdin is we haven't even got to see a cool Aladdin promo poster. Like, I think a cool promo poster for Aladdin, Jasmine, and Jafar would have been very, 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 very interesting. Now, I don't want to use The Walking Dead numbers to essentially say, oh, because Once can't compare to The Walking Dead, it's going to go. I think that's wrong, but the point is, there are shows that are just so being much better received than Once Upon a Time, and I'm really curious, again, where do the Once Upon a Time viewers go? So this video has gone over 25 minutes, which is ridiculous that I've talked for this long about Once Upon a Time and for the view count and whatnot. So I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say about all this in the comments below. Do you think that the viewership has died out for a particular reason? Do you think we can get it back? Do you think Once Upon a Time could be canceled? Now, in all honesty, I think ABC would be foolish to cut it short right now. But, at the same time, I can see why they would, because it's just not drawing in the numbers. They can see that there are much better shows that are being no, Once is a good show. And they can see that there are other shows getting more views, and they're kind of wondering, well, why is Once Upon a Time failing in the department? Maybe we should market Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder more. Maybe we should market Quantico more. I mean, there's a lot of shows that once ABC could focus on, or even get a new one. So again, my question for you guys is, do you think that this could be the last season? What do you think about all the statistics that we just looked at? We looked at a lot of statistics, and I'm really curious what you guys have to say. I think that the CW is our best analogy in order to keep Once Upon a Time on television, because the CW, again, not as prestigious as ABC, but ABC and the CW, they're essentially rivals, because again, it's ABC or Disney versus Warner Brothers / DC, two very, very competitive corporations. So I think if you look at just the views of Supergirl, from this season, and the views of Flash this season, don't look at Arrow, because Arrow would actually support the argument even more, but Arrow should be canceled. But if you look at the views of Supergirl, Arrow, and Flash, you can see that Once Upon a Time still has hope to stay around. So again, share your thoughts about this in the comments below. Thank you so much for getting into my long discussion. Hopefully you've stuck through, and we'll talk real soon. All right, guys.